everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Mike Levin. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Brittany.
We have just surpassed President Trump's first 100-day milestone in the White House, and we have seen a lot. He has signed dozens of executive orders. He has started, stopped, paused trade wars with allies and adversaries alike. And in this milestone, I'm curious, how exactly would you characterize his performance so far?
Well, Brittany, I would characterize it as chaos, dysfunction, and extremism. And the president ran successfully last year on a couple big issues. One was getting costs under control and improving the economy. Another was on immigration. And on the economy, we see the tariffs and the really reckless nature of trade policies around the world, the arbitrary tariffs that were announced and walked back and paused. The business community doesn't know which way to turn, and consumers are already seeing higher prices as a result. I'm worried about empty shelves this summer, and I'm worried about higher prices for the average American for some time to come. It's very easy to break things when it comes to the economy. It's sometimes much harder to fix them. And there's just a recklessness and a chaos around the economic choices the president has made that I think will cause not only the short-term pain, but long-term pain as well. And then on immigration, I think the president really had a huge opportunity to work with Democrats and Republicans alike interested in securing our border and coming up with a bipartisan solution on having a path to citizenship for our agricultural workers, for others who are seeking to contribute positively to our society and our economy. But instead of that, we've seen mass deportation and really lack of due process and an extremism that I didn't fully anticipate, given maybe that was naive, maybe given some of the rhetoric I should have anticipated just how bad it's been. But I think a chaos, dysfunction, and extremism for the first 100 days, which means that given a historic opportunity at a second chance, only Grover Cleveland has gotten a second chance as President of the United States, and the hope and the belief that the president would actually focus on lowering costs and trying to come up with a fix on immigration. Quite the opposite, and that's why he's upside down overall. That's why he's upside down on the economy and why he's upside down on immigration, which really were his superpowers to become elected both the first and the second time.
I want to talk more about the economy and tariffs in a moment, but the CBP said in March that they saw the lowest southwest border crossings in history. President Trump ran on, as you said, securing the border. His deportation policies have been very controversial in these first 100 days. Do you think the downturn in border crossings, do you think that is a bright spot in this administration?
Well, I think it's important to understand how we got those numbers, and a lot of it was fear. A lot of it was trying to create really a tenuous position for anybody in the country who, for example, our farm workforce, our service industry, where I represent in Southern California, roughly 1 in 5 service workers are undocumented. And I think the fear of threat, to be deported, intimidation, I think we all support deporting criminals, deporting gang members, drug dealers, people who are here who are not contributing positively. They should go. But if you're playing by the rules, if you're paying taxes, if you are trying to make a better life for your family, just as my grandparents did when they came to the United States, then in my view, I want you to stay and keep paying taxes and keep working hard on the path to citizenship. When my grandfather became a U.S. citizen at age 50, it was the proudest day of his life. He came to the United States when he was a teenager. And I worry that somebody like him might not even come to the United States today for fear that they would not be treated with dignity and respect. Look, I'm all for securing the border, but I'm not for treating people with cruelty and a lack of humanity.
I know that you think that President Trump fumbled this comeback opportunity, especially in these past first 100 days. A new CNN poll about these 100 days found that more than half of voters think Congress is doing too little to check President Trump's power. And also, Democrats, or those who lean Democrats, this poll found have more negative feelings toward their party's leadership than the right. 61% disapprove and just 38% approve, whereas the broad majority of Republicans approve of Republican leadership. What do you think, as a Democrat in Congress, about these numbers?
What's stunning to me, Brittany, is that the Republicans in Congress have really just handed their constitutional responsibility under Article 1 of the Constitution over to the president. It is up to the Congress to pass the laws, to appropriate the funds, to authorize the programs, and then it's up to the President of the United States to faithfully execute those laws and to apportion the funds, to distribute the funds that Congress has already appropriated and authorized. And that's not what is happening today. What's happening today is that the House and Senate, under Republican control, have given that power over to President Trump. Another example is on tariffs. It's Congress, not the president, that has power on tariffs. But Mike Johnson and John Thune decided, as part of the continuing resolution that passed a while back, to explicitly prohibit Congress from standing against this president on tariffs, as one of many examples. Oversight is another very important function of the Congress. Look, when Mike Johnson was Speaker and Republicans like Jim Jordan had the gavels, they were not bashful about conducting oversight of the Biden administration. But now that President Trump is there, there's no oversight at all of the Trump administration or any of the things that may be unethical or illegal going on in the Trump administration. So I think that there is a lack of a co-equal branch of government, unlike we've seen in the history of, certainly of our lifetimes, but my knowledge is in American history. Madison in Federalist 51 said it would be the ambition of the legislators that would check the ambition of the executive, and clearly that's not happening. I don't think the founders anticipated that the Congress of the United States would roll over the way it has for Donald Trump.
To that point, then, what are rank and file Republicans in Congress saying about President Trump's broad sweeping tariffs? Because I had Senator Mark Kelly on the program just a couple of weeks ago, and he told me even Republicans touting these tariffs publicly, privately, it's a different story. Privately, no one he's talked to, Republican or Democrat, is pro-tariff, pro-President Trump imposing these, using his emergency powers. What do you say to that? And what are you hearing from Republican colleagues?
My friend Mark Kelly is spot on about this. You cannot find a Republican behind closed doors that agrees with the chaos and the destructive nature of the president's trade policies in these first 100 days. They will tell you that they know the president is not doing things in a coherent manner that's consistent with good public policy, and that it's harming the economy. You had one of the GOP mega donors the other day, Ken Griffin, say that 20% of our worth as a country has been destroyed by these, very capricious, arbitrary, and extreme tariff policies. I think there also is an acknowledgement that the way the president initially calculated the tariffs on other countries made no sense. It wasn't anything more than taking the trade deficit divided by exports, coming up with that number, and then cutting it in half. It wasn't actually a reflection of the tariffs being imposed by any other nation on the United States. Rather, it was this, made-up number that somehow was the basis for our tariffs on others. And the president now has said there are 200 deals in place, or that he's working on 200 deals. I don't know whether that's true or false, but I can tell you that when he first got to be president, before the Trump administration and those of us in Congress at the time negotiated the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement, which at the time was said by the Trump administration to be, the greatest trade deal ever. That's what they said. And part of that incentivized companies like General Motors and Ford and others to make investments not only in the United States, but also with our friends to the north in Canada or to the south in Mexico. And now those very companies like GM are being punished for the decisions they made, which they were encouraged to make by the first Trump administration. In fact, GM, under these tariff policies, are paying more than foreign auto manufacturers like Toyota, Honda, or Kia. It makes absolutely no sense to punish American companies like GM, to punish American workers. And I have entrepreneurs in my district, Republicans and Democrats alike, Brittany, who own businesses, who are furious. They have shipments at the port, and they have huge bills, tariff bills. One company told me $920,000 was the first bill that they have to pay to Homeland Security. In many cases, these purchase orders were made before a full understanding of what the tariffs, the tariffs on China and other countries would be. And what we're already seeing is an impact on toys, games, other household goods. And Americans will either be paying more for these goods, workers will be let go, or there just won't be any goods at all. And last thing I'll say, the president yesterday, when asked about toys, he said, well, if somebody is, some kid only has 2 dolls instead of 30, and those 2 dolls cost a little bit more, no big deal. Well, Mr. President, having enough, domestic goods at reasonable prices for American families, whether it be toys, games, electronics, you name it. That's the least that we can expect. We all want to see American manufacturing thrive, but we also want to see American families be able to afford the goods that are here.
You have some other concerns about these tariffs, too, and you voiced them to White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles in a bicameral letter with Senator Adam Schiff. And I want to read part of the letter. The letter asks the White House Chief of Staff this, for a, quote, full accounting of the periodic transaction reports for all senior White House and executive branch employees since the start of the administration. Can you talk to us specifically about why you're asking for this information?
Well, Brittany, since I started in Congress, I believe that members of Congress should not be trading individual shares of stock. We should never be putting money in our own pockets on the basis of non-public information that we get as members of Congress. The same should be true, in my view, for the administration. They get access to non-public information all the time about what the president may or may not be planning to do. I'm going to keep working very hard on a member stock trading ban, and I'm going to keep working on accountability and transparency. And so the days of April 8 and April 9 were very concerning to me. You may remember April 9 at 9:37 in the morning, the president posted on Truth Social that today is a great time to buy. Offering stock advice is not what the president of the United States should be doing in any event. Then about 4 hours later, 1:18 p.m., that's when the announcement was made of a 90-day pause on most of the tariffs. And what I want to know is, what did members of Congress do? What did members of the administration do leading up to that tweet at 9:37 a.m. and then between 9:37 a.m. and 1:18 p.m.? In other words, did members of Congress have access to non-public information, whether it be from their conversations with the president or others? Did members of the administration have non-public information and then use it to trade stock? And if so, I think it's a violation of the public trust, and Americans have a right to know about it. And I think it would be a gross disservice to keep all of that information from the public.
To that point, pre-9:37 post where President Trump said, essentially, it is a good time to buy, is there any evidence of congressional insider trading or anyone in the Trump administration involved in insider trading? Is there anything like that that you know of so far?
Well, it's circumstantial. We know that the president did have a dinner the prior evening with members of Congress. And I'd love to know, which, if any, members of Congress traded pre-market on before the announcement at 9:37 a.m. I'd like to know what members of the administration did as well during that couple days. And I really think between April 2nd and April 9th is the operative time, because you saw the markets really negatively impacted on the Thursday and Friday before. And then, of course, a lot of middle-class people, a lot of seniors, a lot of retirees that did not have the risk tolerance, they may have sold. I remember speaking to my own dad and telling him, do not panic. And I encouraged him to hang in there. But he was very concerned that Thursday and Friday before, when the markets were down, around 3,000 points, as I recall. Then, of course, the day on April the 9th, when the president did make his announcement of the pause, I think the markets went back up, and made up maybe 2/3 of what it had lost the prior week. So seeing what happened that entire week from the 2nd to the 9th is really important. But on a go-forward basis, one thing that does give me great hope is that in the wake of all this, there's been a renewed push on a bipartisan basis for a stock trading ban for members of Congress. And we've got Republicans from Chip Roy to Josh Hawley who have talked about it. You've got Democrats now like Hakeem Jeffries that are for it. And you've got President Trump, who was for it back in 2022 and then said again that he would sign a stock trading ban if it got to his desk. So the only thing holding it up at this point, in my view, is Speaker Mike Johnson. And I hope that he will recognize it's important we move this forward. And I'm going to be continuing. I just wrote him as well, and I'll continue to be writing him and asking him to hold a vote on the stock trading ban.
You're not the first member of Congress to tell me that leadership in Congress is the one holding this up. I've spoken with Congressman Tim Burchett, who is a huge proponent of banning stock trading within Congress. So there is bipartisan appetite. And this is what he told me in March. Quote, "I've been told to quit talking about stuff like this by some of our leadership." And I said, "Well, it's the truth, though, right?" And they said, "Well, yeah, but some members of leadership aren't real happy about when I talk about things like this. So I don't think it'll go anywhere." Why do you think members of leadership, and you're calling out Speaker Mike Johnson by name, why do you think that they don't have this type of appetite?
I think that there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. who do very well with things just as they are. That's why it's very tough to change things like a stock trading scheme where, you're able to report 30 days later. It's very weak in terms of what you actually have to report. And a lot of members, I think we know, have used non-public information in a way to enrich themselves. I think that's part of the record now for a number of years. I look at it also in terms of things like campaign finance reform. Why is it so hard to reform a broken campaign finance system? It's because members of Congress are doing just fine the way things are. But I think that the public will demand large changes, particularly if they see that there were members of Congress who used that non-public information to enrich themselves. I see it as corruption. I see it as something that has to be exposed. And ultimately, I think sunlight will hopefully be the best antiseptic. There are a couple of big differences. One is that the leader of House Democrats now, Hakeem Jeffries, has come out in support of a ban. And the other is that President Trump has said he would sign a ban into law. So I think if the vote did come up, I think it would pass both the House and the Senate. And I hope that Mike Johnson will understand the importance of this and will proceed.
Congressman, I know I've kept you far too long. I do just want to ask you one question, though, about the budget bill. President Trump said very recently that entitlements like Medicaid and Social Security won't be touched. Do you believe him?
I don't. And I don't always like hearing the word entitlement because I think it's an earned benefit. I think that it's a contract that was made between seniors and the government, particularly Social Security. What I will say is that there's no mathematical way that Republicans can have the kind of cuts that they're contemplating. $1.5 trillion is the amount that the House has been instructed to cut by the budget instructions. And you can't get there without a dramatic cut to Medicaid, without either dramatically reducing the percentage that the states will receive from the federal government or by capping the amount on a per-person basis that the federal government will fund. Either of those would be incredibly detrimental to my constituents and to those most vulnerable in our country, whether it's the senior who relies on Medicaid for nursing home care, whether it's the child that needs Medicaid, or the veteran. 1 in 10 veterans also is on Medicaid. So it's really cynical, in my view, to go after the most vulnerable in our society, take that money and use it to fund tax cuts for rich people. It's really wrong. And at the end of the day, I think the American people will reject it.
Congressman, I would love to keep the conversation going. Perhaps you can join me again soon. Congressman Mike Levin, thank you so much. You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Happy to join you again when you can do it.